give you an idea of what I'm going to talk about today is we're going to talk a little bit about design thinking for healthcare and how it can actually benefit the industry. Any of you who've ever worked within pharma before will probably understand this more, and some of you who haven't and worked just within healthcare companies won't kind of maybe not recognize some of the issues around working within pharma. A quick pass through, what does success look like in healthcare and pharma solutions? And then I've got 4 case studies to just point out some of the things that I've seen over the last year that I think are quite interesting, and also demonstrate the thinking that goes on with designing things for healthcare. So, talk about design thinking. So, in terms of, we talk about design thinking within Blue Latitude, and we talk about it in that it fosters innovation. So that's where the innovation comes from. So the research gives us a really deep understanding of the problem that we're trying to solve. So this won't be new to many of you. Design artifacts and concepts that allow us to communicate and collaborate. We use failure positively, so anyone in UX probably does that anyway. Understanding the objectives of all the stakeholders. And that's kind of where some of the problems arise, besides the fact that pharma doesn't really understand UX in the way that some other industries do. They're fairly immature when it comes to UX. They understand business intelligence, they understand scientific research, but the bit in between that we do, which is more I refer to as design intelligence or customer research or user research, is a little bit different for them. And it also represents a little bit of a risk. They're quite a risk-averse industry, as you would be if you were designing drugs. Okay. So when we talk about one of the bigger challenges in designing for healthcare and pharma is really understanding what success looks like. And it's not because we have one person to understand, it's because we have many people within that system. So if we do something for one person, it also has to do something for the other end of that chain of customers, really. So we talk about the business is looking at mostly money. And are they going to make money? What's it going to do for their business? We talk about the payer. And these are the people who commission drugs. These are the people who make decisions about, in social healthcare systems or insurance companies, about what drugs they will pay for. So what drugs you can have. We talk about the service provider. So that's, in the UK, that's the NHS. So who is providing that service, and how do they measure the success of something that we produce for them? And then we have the receiver of the care, and those are, not just the patient, but also the person that cares for them or their family. And then we also talk about the tech partner, but that's a little bit vague. So it's the person or the organization that has to not just deliver, but maintain and possibly re-engineer anything that we create. So you have to think about what's important for all those people. So, when you're looking at the payer, what's important for the payer is, the effectiveness of the drug, but also what comes with it. Yeah? So it's the efficacy and the efficiency of that drug, but also, what's the cost and what are the other things that come with it to support it. So things that we might create to help that drug or the people who are administering it be easier or more effective. So for the service provider, it's how difficult is this thing going to be for me? So do I need to create a service that helps them administer the drug? Because all drugs aren't administered the same way. And we were talking about one today, it takes 7 hours the first time you have it. You have to sit for 7 hours. Yeah. So how do you administer that drug? And what does that mean for the service provider who's actually providing that drug? What happens during that time? And for the receiver of care, how do I make my experience better? What can I do to have a bit more control and a bit more confidence? So things that we create around that. And then for the tech partner, it's trying to get it closer to being right the first time, and also being able to manage it, because someone has to manage it. And some organizations don't have the capacity to actually manage big technical solutions. So I'm just going to go in and talk about 4 case studies that I've seen that I really liked. So I've seen these. This one, we actually work with someone who's been using this for 3 years. So this is a continuous glucose monitoring system. And he uses the 4 version. There's now a number 5 version. So why is this important? Yeah, so this is an FDA approved medical device. Okay, so it's not like an app, it's medically approved by the FDA, and it helps people with diabetes manage their diabetes because it tracks every 5 minutes, yeah, the direction of travel of your glucose level and how fast it's going, yeah, which is monumental if you're trying to manage your diabetes. Anybody in the room a diabetic that actually wants to admit it? Okay, do you use this?
I haven't used the Dexcom, but I've used other CGMs.
Yeah. So this one's very simple, and the next one that's coming out, which is only available in the States at the moment, it has a little sensor that goes underneath the skin. It has a patch that tracks that, and this version that's available in the UK, the patch goes to a phone. No, it goes to a sensor that takes the information, and then you put it onto your machine. The next version actually hooks to a pump. And so as your levels are going up and down, it actually manages your insulin. So what this has done is it helps people manage and live a much better quality of life. So the person that uses it in our office says that this has changed his life over the last 3 years. And it also reduces the amount of sort of critical incidents and even fatalities that you get with diabetes and it going wrong. So this is another one. I saw this last year, middle of last year. This is called the Proteus Smart Pill. Now this is so cool. This is the first ingestible computer. Now it's about the size of a grain of sand and it goes inside the pill. The only stuff that I could find on what it's actually been using on is a drug called Abilify, which is for serious mental illness. And it's the type of drug that it makes you feel better and then you stop taking it. So people need to know that you're still taking it. So that little computer that sits within that pill registers when you take it, how many you take, what time you take, and there's also that little pad on the side which also takes a lot of vital statistics. So if you're trying to understand what's happening with your patient and how well the drugs are working, you also have vital statistics, and all of that is shared. So the same thing with the glucose monitor. You can share all that information with family members, you can share it with your doctor. So when you get to the doctor, he can actually see real information. Yeah? Not, oh, well, I think it kind of went wrong on Tuesday. He can actually see or she can actually see what's happening. You know, if you have a child with diabetes, you can actually find out if they've actually, done anything, because you can see if their levels are going up or down, and you can call them. Yeah. So, but again, the other thing that's really interesting about this is that we all know that clinical trials happen, but clinical trials, I think a lot of us people think about clinical trials that you're in a room, you're in a facility somewhere and they've kind of kept you in. A lot of clinical trials, people are out in the world living their lives and taking the drugs. So you need to understand if people are taking the drugs. Yeah? Because what happens is you get false information about whether the drugs are working or not. Yeah? Because basically the drugs don't work if you don't take them. Yeah? So you need to know if they're taking them, and you need to know what's happening within that person's system as well. Okay, the next one. This is a project that we did at Blue Latitude. This is the only one that's from Blue Latitude. The other ones aren't ours. And this seems from the outside incredibly simple. This is basically a search for physicians to be able to find what we call both on and off-label information about a particular product. We did this in conjunction with Eli Lilly, and we know from lots of other research, ours and others, that what doctors are expecting is to have that information in 5 minutes. Eli Lilly had a phone system or an email system, which could take you a day, could take hours before you got the information back about a drug. Most physicians are asking you about information about a particular drug to use it the way it was planned to be used, or possibly use it for a different condition. And they're waiting for that information, and they need it in 5 minutes because they're usually in a clinic or with a patient. So what we did is we did a lot of research on what are those questions that people ask about particular drugs. So we kind of did it on the 20-80 rule. So 20% of the questions that give people 80% of the answers. And you can, when you type in a question about a particular Lilly drug, what comes up at the top, no matter what search engine you're on, will be a link to the Lilly medical answers. And it comes back, asks you to self-authenticate, say that you're a doctor. If you're asking for on-label information, if you're asking for information that it isn't normally used for, which is off-label information, it asks you to actually put in your registration number. So we've created a solution for HCPs where they can get the information they need while they're actually in a clinic, because most of them are walking around treating patients most of the time. So we actually won an award for this. We're very proud of this. We won an Innovation Award late last year for that. And this is my most favorite one. So does anybody know anybody that has COPD? Yeah? Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease? Does anybody, yeah, a couple? Okay, my mom has it as well. So you know what these people are like? Most of them are quite elderly. If they're not elderly, they seem elderly because they can't breathe. Okay, so what was happening, this is a really interesting project because it doesn't use Wizzo technology, it uses a telephone. And it's set up, it's a set of 5 questions. So the patient gets a call twice a week, and they answer the 5 questions with buttons on their phone. Depending on what those answers are and what their previous answers were, they can get either a phone call from a nurse or a doctor or a visit. So this is solving a problem where it was costing over £1,500 a year to service these patients, plus lots and lots and lots of visits to A&E, because what happens when you can't breathe or it's getting worse and worse and worse is you go to A&E. So this is stopping people from going to A&E unnecessarily and actually treating them before it gets to a serious point. So it now costs about £26 a person. So they went through, the cost of the NHS has gone down incredibly. The people who use it, everyone who's used it has 100% said that they would recommend it to someone else. It is providing better provision of care, and I think 29% less admissions to A&E for those who are using it as opposed to those who aren't using it. So patients have reported that I think they went from 40% down to 19% on the HAD scale, which is a scale they use in hospitals around anxiety and depression. So people were, kind of very worried about their health care, and so always trying to want to go see the doctor. But it's very difficult to get these people out because they aren't normally very ambulatory. So a very, very simple solution uses a phone. Most people have a phone, and it allows people to just answer these questions. They felt better taken care of. They felt like they had better control of their lives. This is such a simple solution. But this is really understanding that, NHS, the service provider, had to reduce their costs. It was costing too much money. They were, there was a big burden on A&E, and so it had to reduce that burden on A&E, but without taking away the care that these people need. So this is such a simple solution, and somebody just really thought about this. This is done NHS in Berkshire, and I can't remember the other county that it's with. I live in Berkshire, so that's why I remember that. But just a very, very simple, not Wizzo technology, but actually really addressing the problem, and addressing the problem from, a couple different sides, and also the care as well as in that package as well, because there's someone that has to take them to the emergency room. So that was pretty much all I had to talk about, was those 4 things. I actually had more, but I took them out because I thought, I've got 1 minute left. I took a couple out because I thought I didn't have enough time. So,
in the third case study, the Google for Drugs thing.
Google for drugs. Not quite Google for drugs, but...
I'm curious, the timing around it, you said it was 5 minutes for the doctors were trying to find for patients, right? They wanted to find that information within 5 minutes. What's driving that 5 minutes?
So there's a report that came, there's lots of reports that come out of the referred to as Manhattan reports, which are syndicated reports that come from lots of different places. So out of some of that research, they understood that about 85% of doctors search online for information. And what they're not getting is the actual product information. So depending on how long the product has been established, it may be that the only place they can get the information is actually from the pharma company. So, and what came out of that report is they're expecting to get information within 5 minutes. This actually works much quicker. I did one this morning and it took about 3 seconds. Once I could remember how to type in the drug name. That took me a long time. But the answers come up quite quickly. It usually comes up first on your search. I only did it in Google because that's what I've got on my machine. But it works across other search engines as well.
So it's the innovation, not the time, but the breadth of information?
The innovation is the search engine optimization. Yeah. So it looks quite simple when you look at it, but there was a lot of research that went behind actually understanding all the questions that people ask. And I talked about sort of the 80-20 rule. So understanding 20% of the questions that would get to 80% of the information. So you get a page back that actually gives you lots of product information, but also connects you to research papers and other things about that product.
Any more questions?
Hi. So this is a question about the COPD example. What I really like about this is that it harnesses. I'll just talk about that. Is that it harnesses the phone. So, like you said, it's a product that everyone has. It's not relying on an app or something that people have to download.
Well, there is something in. No, it's not an app, but there is something behind it. It's,
right.
Yeah.
But do you think that we should be looking at more simple ways to address problems like this? Because I mean, we're so bombarded with apps and things, and this target audience might not be that digitally savvy, so we should be looking at products that they already have which could work.
Yeah. So typically these people are older, but not always. It's not costing anybody anything, and like you said, this is asking about designing apps. The other problem with apps is most apps out on the market are not medical devices. They haven't been medically approved. They don't do, if you're interested, there's a really interesting article in Wired about mental health apps. Because these things aren't scientifically tested. They're usability tested, because they're coming out of, technology startups, not from a real medical perspective. So this has obviously been tested, and it has data that has come out of it about how it's used and how people feel about it and how it changes their anxiety and their depression and all that kind of stuff. So yep, it's about the context. These people are old, they're housebound, they're not going to use an app. My mother can't even use an Apple iPad, because her eyes are so bad she can't see it. So to be able to, she's got her big phone with a big button, so she could use this. This isn't available in the US, but she's got other stuff there. But so it is about knowing the context, knowing who you're dealing with, because sometimes they may be getting drugs that make them very forgetful. Yeah. So drugs do different things to us, and so it's really understanding the context.
Perhaps related to how you just answered that question, I wondered if you could say anything about how regulation in this sector affects innovation, or kind of restrictions or...
Okay. Yeah, it affects it a lot in many different ways. So in one way is that it's really, really difficult for us if we're working within a product realm and with patients to do anything in agile. So any discussion guide we do for any kind of research, you're looking at least 2 weeks to get it approved. Yeah, and if depending on what types of patients you're using, you could have to go through what's very similar to clinical trial approval, which takes even longer. We did one last year. How many months was that, the FECI that we got? Do you remember, Emer?
So yeah, it took about 2 or 3 months.
2 or 3 months to get approval just to do the research. So doing things agile, it doesn't work. It's a very risk-averse, particularly pharma is very risk-averse. You have, as well as the regulatory, the legal, and the medical compliance. There's also the market research compliance that you have to go through. So there's a community called BHBIA, which is the UK one, and you have to do all of that as well when you're doing research. What else? They don't really understand UX very well, so sometimes it's quite hard to understand. And even when we do research, we very often ask a question and then probe. You have to have every probing question in your discussion guide, because every question has to be approved before you can do it. So it does make a difference.
Okay. Sorry, I think we don't have any more time for questions.
Yeah.
But